Now, in the Berlin Mass, is Clément with us today?
Yes.
I can't see you. You're just a black space on my screen, but never mind.
But I have a... The sound is not the same as the picture. I have me.
Oh, you're over there. Yes, of course you are. Okay. Oh, that's subtle, isn't it? Right. Oh, God. Your questions with regard to this piece are what makes you choose between a solo formation or a choir? Why does Pärt let us choose? Is it a matter of the acoustic? And when there is no indication of tempo or dynamic, how do you choose what to do? Does that sum up the questions?
Yes, exactly.
Good. The original piece was written for a quartet of 4 singers and organ, and it was composed to be performed at a large religious festival for the Catholic Church in Germany, in a large church in Berlin, just inside East Berlin. But at that point, I think the wall was not down yet, but the two, what are they called, marks, West and East marks, were already equal as money, and you could walk without any hindrance between East and West. So it was a very special time when we did this piece. But it was originally composed for just the 4 voices, and which did not mean that it should not be done with a choir. I've done it with choir many times, and in fact it's much easier like that, especially when you look at the bass part, which somewhere goes up to F and even top G. And if you're one of the 4 singers and you're the one trying to sing the bass part, those are uncomfortable moments at best. But then, as I said just now, a little while after that, he did, maybe a year or two, he orchestrated it, and the orchestral version is definitely for choir. There are no more notes in it, but it is definitely a choral piece, really. That doesn't change the fact that there are some parts of it which ideally might be sung solo. Though again, as far as I can recall, I haven't got the score in front of me of the chorus version. I'm not sure if it says solo. For example, after the Gloria, in the Alleluia verses, can you find that?
Yes.
Yeah. It seems to me rather obvious that the choir sings the Alleluias, and then a solo voice should sing the solo passage that follows.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah, and that
then it's a slightly different question, I think, when you come to the Veni Sancte Spiritus, which obviously suits the idea of 4 solo voices very well, but it's a little bit odd, perhaps, to rest the whole choir at that point. And so the other option is, of course, to do it chorally. But I think beyond that, when you have a choir, the whole thing is choral, apart from those 1 or 2 places. But as I say, it was definitely intended to be singable by 4 individual singers. But yes, I've done both versions, both the string version and the organ version, and the organ version both with quartet and also with a relatively small, but anyway, a choir, 12 or 16 voices. So what I didn't have to choose the first time, because that was what was arranged, that we would come and sing a concert and there would be 2 or 3 new pieces by Arvo when we got there, well, in advance. I think that you say, why does Pärt let us choose? Well, that's the history behind the piece, which probably explains that a little bit. usually it's a little bit more clear that this is a solo line, or this is essentially a choral music. But you might also remember that the very early pieces he wrote in Tintinnabuli were also for that early music group I mentioned yesterday, where they only ever had a quartet. And so the pieces were designed to be sung by individual singers. And I think they still work best that way, but it doesn't mean that you can't do them with a small choir, let's say, and with especially with organ. All of those pieces that were originally with an ensemble of Renaissance instruments, as many as 10 or 11 instruments, have since been made into versions just for organ and voices. And I don't think anybody anymore does the original versions. It was actually when I first met Arvo that we had that discussion about, is it necessary to have all these instruments? Because we can't afford it, we being a group of 4 singers, the Hilliard Ensemble. And I wanted to do those pieces. I wanted to put on some concerts of Arvo's music, because it had never been done in London, not this vocal music. And so he thought that, yes, that was a very good idea to do it with organ. It worked so well. We had a very good organist. I mean, there are a lot of good organists around, but this is somebody who somehow makes any organ that you put in front of him sound like a wonderful instrument. And he seemed to understand how to play Arvo's music with, as it were, vocal phrasing. And I still work with him whenever we can get together. But all of those pieces have remained organ and voices, either solos or the later pieces like this one, chorus. But I actually quite like the fact there is this piece. It's quite a substantial piece, 25 minutes, a whole mass. And I like the fact that there is a piece existing which you can do with just a quartet of voices and an organ. Works very well. Now, I asked you yesterday to have a look at the Credo and Veni Sancte Spiritus. I don't know if you had time to do this, but what were your findings with the Credo, for example? Did you find out what was happening there? Nobody?
I found that he used melisma, so on one vowel, sometimes several notes, and when this happens on the melodic part, then it breaks the line. The second note of the melisma is not as stepwise.
Yes, I see. Yes, okay. I'm looking for something more broadly structural.
Yeah, the alto and bass are imitating all the time.
Right.
And tenor and soprano. And they are also changing turns, so it's kind of...
Well, yes, what happens is that if you look at the bass and the alto part at the very beginning of the Credo, if you look at what the bass sings in the first 4 bars, when the alto begins on the word patrem, they sing exactly the same notes. And meanwhile, the bass has started with the next phrase, starting on B natural, patrem omnipotentem. And then when you get to the alto part at 7, the alto then sings exactly the same phrase in terms of pitches, but made to fit the words. And then at the word visibilium, in the alto part, there the alto is singing the pitches that the bass started singing in bar 7, I think on the second pitch, the C sharp. And then it starts a new phrase at bar 13, And then et in unum, the alto starts with the next phrase, and the bass now re-enters and sings the pitches of altos et invisibilium. So they take turns at being the voice that's ahead, one after the other, then they drop out, and then the next one goes in front. And that simply goes on all the way through the piece. You don't need to know that in order to conduct it. But again, it's one of the things that helps you to understand how the piece is put together. And I think the more you know about that, of any piece that you're performing, then it's a good thing. It helps you to understand what it is you're dealing with. But apart from that, as I say, the biggest characteristic of the credo was the fact that all the stresses were in the wrong place. But that has now been put right. Yeah. Any other comments on that? Any other observations with the credo?
The organ part.
Yes.
Is also interesting because the melody voice in organ part is always starting at same pitch, right, and then going the other direction.
Yeah. Again, that's an example of how Arvo always likes to have those kinds of imitation. Well, if that one was going down, then this time it's going to go up, and so on. It's something that recurs all the time. I can't actually see that in my score. I have it in another place, but I've only got the choir parts in front of me at the moment. But I remember that, yes. Okay. And now maybe we could look at Veni Sancte Spiritus, which comes just before the credo. This was partly added to the piece. Well, I think it was the sole reason. Well, the event I told you about, the concert in Berlin in this massive church, took place at what you call it, Pfingst, in I don't know what you would call it in Finnish. Whitsun, anyway, in English.
It's Helluntai for Finnish people.
So, yeah.
Helluntai.
Does everyone know what it is I'm talking about? Anyway, Pfingst in German, Whitsun in English, and something else in Finnish, which I didn't quite catch. Sorry. So anyway, that's why this particular sequence was chosen. And the verses for Easter, I think there is also, maybe it's in your edition, he later made a different version of the verses so that it would suit Christmas. But I'm not sure, I don't have that. And I'm not sure what that does to Veni Sancte Spiritus left out. But the Alleluia verses for Christmas are added so that it could become a Christmas piece, in effect. Now, Veni Sancte Spiritus, who can tell me what's happening here? It's a very, very lovely melody that's going on the whole time. Always sung by a soloist, occasionally with added notes from another voice, but only occasionally. Wherever there are rests, the organ fills in with something. And then later on, there is one point where all the four voices sing a verse together. But essentially, it's one solo, and then a different voice, and then another voice in turn. But again, I'm looking at the way that Arvo has put the whole piece together. Did anybody find anything about this? I take it that means no, right?
Well, there are 13 bar phrases, or like figures, as you say, but it comes from text, so it's
exactly
natural.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I wrestled with this for a long time because the more I sang it to myself, the whole thing, the more I said, well, this is the same, but it's never the same. What the hell is going on? And so I started to write out each vocal line, one verse at a time, on top of each other. and I began, that took too long. So I gave myself, I put a number for each note. Simply, it's in E minor, so I'll call E 1. The D, which occurs occasionally, I'll call 0, and then 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to the C, which is the highest note that's ever sung. And as I put the numbers in, and for all 10 or 11, 12, 13, whatever it is, repetitions, a very clear and very obvious pattern comes out. Apart from the C, which is only added in the second verse, the whole series of pitches is exactly the same every time, but everything moves over by one place. So you get the same sequence of pitches every single time, but beginning increasingly later in the piece. Only one note at a time, but that is sufficient to make them sound more different than they in fact are. So that if you look at Veni Sancte Spiritus, the next phrase, Ve, and then goes on, Ni ba 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 bum di, da 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 di di di, at figure 2. I'm not singing in the rhythms on purpose, just to try and show the repetition. So anyway, there you are. That's what's going on, and it does. I was very pleased to do that because it's puzzled me for a long time as to why this piece, which is very lyrical, why does it work so well? Why does this melody sound the same, and yet it never is the same? And the answer is simply, it starts in a different place each time. Only one place apart.
A question?
Sorry?
A question?
Yes.
What did you
louder if you can.
Yeah. What did you take for a unit when you were writing this melodies out? What was your unit? How many bars?
Well, each phrase. Can you see this at all? It's pretty blurred, isn't it? Da, da, dee, da, 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 da. So I put a bar line at the end of each phrase. So 3 bar lines, with one phrase on one line, and then just like that. And it becomes, as you go down, it's 2. And of course, it's much clearer to see when you have only the numbers, because the dots are all over the place. But to see a pattern in a sequence of numbers is much easier than looking at a series of notes to see a pattern. And I'm someone who's useless at mathematics, and yet I could still see this. Suddenly, doing, I realized what he'd done. So I made a list of some of the numbers and I sent them to him without any comment. I'm waiting to hear if he understands what I'm referring to.
I would have another question about that. Is the accompanying voice, the tintabuli voice, also having a same pattern, same way of composing?
I think the answer to the question is yes. You only have to look briefly to see. It probably comes at figure 2 for the first time. Am I right? Veni, and then pauperum.
Yes.
Yeah. So all you've got to do is to see how does that relate to the bass part, and it's clear that it's what I call first position. It's the closest position, but always above. So it's very easy to sort that one out. And Arvo has often used the idea that even when he doesn't write, I don't know if you know the piece Stabat Mater. It's not a choral piece. It's 3 voices and 3 string players. But a lot of that has, for example, a soprano singing solo arpeggios, and they are based on the line that hasn't been written, that you can't hear, but what that line would have been given the way that he constructs his melodic parts in that piece. You can still, in other words, that melody could be written down, but not sung, because it's there by inference. Yeah, and of course the opposite is possible. As here, we have a melody without a tintinnabuli part, except at certain moments. But it's very easy just to go back and work out what those notes would have been. It's just simple. It's very easy. I haven't bothered to look at the other parts for that, but for example, in figure 5, the bass is singing under the vocal, underneath the melodic part. So the B on the word looks, and then the E on the re, and the ple stays on E because it's still the next note below F sharp, etc. Yeah. Once you understand the principles, it's very easy to copy the technique. There's nothing difficult about it. The hard part is making memorable music out of it, and also having the ideas about when to stop and when to start a process like that. Now, were there any other Berliner Mass points? Oh, somebody asked about, it was also Clément, how I conduct the Agnus Dei canon at the end. It's an interesting question. You've got a good one. I think I started basically in 4 with the first voice, but somehow ended up beating 3/4 on Dei for the second voice. I don't think it made much difference actually, because it's very easy for the singers to keep together there. But that's actually what I did. I start off with the downbeat on the top voice, Agnus Dei. So I beat a 5/4, which somewhere around the middle of the bar changes its identity, so to speak. And the same thing with the other phrases as well. The music is very slow there, so.
But the question was more about
let me say one thing. If that same thing were written and the passage was to be done very fast, then I think I would definitely have made a decision to follow either one voice or the other. Then they both have a chance of understanding where I am. Sorry, what were you going to say? I thought I heard another question.
No, it's for me.
Yeah.
It's all right for me. Thanks.
Oh, I see. Okay, good. Okay.